Hi everyone. So today I'm just going to be answering some questions that have come into the womenswellbeing.me space, and also some questions that I got through from the Pelvic Floor Restore course. So all to do with women's wellbeing and how we can function as optimally as possible. So I thought I'd just answer some of the questions I've got through. If you're able to join me live and you've got any other questions, then by all means just either put them in the chat or wait till I finish and you can ask me. There's always other women who are going to be wanting to know the answers just like you do. So always good to share what's going on with you and then hopefully help somebody else as well. So one thing I wanted to address first of all is how much I have been noticing breathing issues with women, especially midlife women, and anxiety levels, and basically breathing into the chest and shoulders hunching up, and people with chronic issues around the neck and the upper back area and locked jaw. So if this is you, please listen. Especially when we have hormonal fluctuations. So especially when our progesterone is low, and particularly when it's low compared to estrogen, we can have more feelings of anxiety and we can have more dysregulation with our thoughts. So do find out what's going on with your hormones if you are finding that you are feeling stressed all the time. And then the other thing is to start to unwind the stress. For most of us, it's something that we literally can't do. We're used to being on all the time. We're used to being in go, go, go movement forward all the time. And if we do have any downtime, then we might go to the spa to get a little massage, or we might go for a run, and that's it. And then we go back to doing. However, especially in midlife, like I said, when our hormones start to change and we don't have the access to the estrogen as much as we did when we were in our 20s and 30s, it's incredibly important to start to consciously unwind from that chronic level of stress. Yoga tools are amazing for helping us to do this, because we start to connect with our breath, and it is our breath that is that connection between what goes on between the ears and the rest of our body, because we are holistic beings. So one of the key tools of obviously with yoga breathing is the extended exhalation. So I talk about all this all the time, but it's so important. When we consciously relax the jaw and breathe out, apana, a lowering, calming, releasing, opening breath out, we start to activate the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve literally goes from the brain and it down, and it goes into all of our organs. So it is how the brain tells the body that the body is safe and can go into relax mode, the parasympathetic nervous system. So that is the rest and the digest. That is the cave woman sitting around the fire, chatting, laughing, digesting food, etc. It's the opposite state of the sympathetic nervous system, where we are running away from the saber-toothed tiger, or we are worried about everybody else, making sure they are safe, gathering them all together, running to safety. So we've got the two nervous system sides of the automatic nervous system. We've got the sympathetic, which is the stress, basically when our body is being pumped full of adrenaline and cortisol. And we've got the parasympathetic, where we're relaxed and healing can take place, digestion can take place, we're not constipated, all of that kind of thing. So yoga gives us amazing tools to be able to use that long exhalation to unwind using movement, to unwind from tension spots and slowly move into a state of stillness, where the brain waves drop into an alpha state, and that is the creative state, that is the healing state, that is a state where we can start to influence the unconscious mind and basically do some reprogramming if we have got constant unhelpful programming going on in the background that keeps us in this go, 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 stress, stress, stress mode. Yoga tools can help us to sort of unwind those, and so we can access that healing parasympathetic state a lot more easily. So if you are somebody who knows you're holding stress, if you are biting through your mouth guards at night, if you're in pain, and if you're finding that you've got tension patterns around the hips, around the pelvic floor, and urgency issues, then please make it a priority for next year to unwind the central nervous system, to calm things down. So on a Monday night in my Women's Wellbeing.me space, I have a yin yoga, restorative yoga, calming the central nervous system down practice, where we do deep opening release work, tension unwinding work, and then also it's very much a mental practice as well. So that can be a good one on a regular basis, just to gift yourself that calming down time. We have the 4 pillars of good health, and those 4 pillars are basically de-stressing, because we know that stress is underneath almost all dis-ease. We have sleep, and it's really important, especially in midlife, to make sure that we have enough sleep. When we don't have enough sleep, it's very, very hard to operate well, and we do tend to have more dysregulated hormones. We will have more of a propensity to be in that fight and flight state, and to eat badly, etc. So prioritizing winding down at night so that you can gift yourself a decent block of sleep, and doing all the sleep hygiene stuff, which I'm not going to go into now, in order to prioritize decent sleep. Obviously intake diet is super duper duper important. I was talking to somebody who's got hypermobility. If you have hypermobility, making sure you get enough collagen in your diet, glutamine and collagen, just to keep those muscle fibers as elastic and as functional as possible as you age, is really important. Diet to keep the constipation at bay. So as we lose our estrogen levels as we age, digestive balance, so the gut flora balance can go off a lot more easily. So making sure you are looking after the gut flora, you're doing whatever you need to repair leaky gut. You're giving yourself a wonderful wide variety of different vegetables in particular, and protein to help heal and help that digestive process, so that we can avoid constipation. We know that constipation is the #1 driver of urinary incontinence. So if your bladder, if your bowel is not sumping and functioning well, constipation will make the detrusor muscles of the bladder more unstable, and that will make urgency and stress incontinence a lot worse. So diet, super, super important. And of course, movement. And so I've not said exercise, I've said movement, because so many of us sit at the desk for 6-8 hours, hardly move, and then might go to a HIIT class of an evening. You cannot undo patterns of not moving by doing small chunks of hardcore, especially asymmetrical movement. It's so much better to get in little incremental pieces of movement through your day, and build those one on top of the other, and break up periods of sitting. Sitting really is the new smoking. It does so much damage, and especially if you're not sitting in alignment. If you are slouching, if your core is disengaged, if your lower back is rounding, if your sitting bones and your tailbone are tucked underneath your pelvis, and you're sitting like that for hours at a time, it's very hard to unwind from that. So getting in movement, getting up to put on the kettle, doing your hip circles, amazing for women to mobilize the pelvis, hula hoop the hips around, do the Elvis twist to release the hip joints, stretch out your spine, If you're in the womenswellbeing.me space in the library, I have got different desk stretches, sequences. So if you've just got 5 minutes, if you've got 10 minutes, you can go and watch one of those sequences and just open up the pelvis, release tension from your shoulders, and do a little bit of core strengthening so that when you go and sit down again, you're able to keep this area active and your shoulders have dropped down your back again. So do have a look at that. Movement throughout the day. So I've also got the bathroom boot camp, which is just a handy cue sheet to keep in the loo. And every time you go to the loo, you might just tack on 1 or 2, or maybe do all of them, just do a few rounds of each one. And you'll find that by the end of the day, if you have done some core strengthening, some glute work, you've opened up the pectoral muscles, you've strengthened your upper back muscles, you've done some pelvic floor activation and conscious release work, you're focusing on your breath, do that several times through the day, and that's a really nice little bit of movement. If you add in walking in nature, hiking up and down hills, getting those glutes strong, making sure that you do all of your movement when you're in good alignment, then that's great. That's really good. And to be honest, so much better than, like I said, sitting for bed periods and then once or twice a week doing just like an hour of hard exercise, which will end up putting inadvertent stress on your joints. And often if you're in misalignment or if you're hypertonic, you'll be kind of hanging into ligaments and not working your muscles properly. So the four pillars there of good well-being, good health. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the dropping off of estrogen at perimenopause. So just to remind you, I've talked about this so many times, but between 35 years and 50 years, our estrogen for the average woman drops by about 35%. So not a huge amount up until the year or two before we go through actual menopause itself. Now, menopause is that moment in time where we haven't had a period for 12 months. So prior to that moment, the year or two, or normally about 2 years prior to that, the estrogen levels drop right off, like off the edge of the cliff. And that's the time when 80% of women, most women will find that their pelvic floor function really starts to nosedive as well. And so potentially talking to a GP about getting some topical estrogen cream or a estrogen pessary, like a little tablet that can either go up into the vagina and release the estrogen to keep the muscle fibers of that the vagina walls stronger, or if you're using the cream to keep the pelvic floor muscles and the sphincter muscles of the urethra and around the anus and the perineum area just more plump and able to close, or just not uncomfortable and more elastic so that they're able to hold the pelvic organs well. That is kind of considered the gold standard of pelvic floor care, to use a topical cream to keep everything really nice and elastic, or the pessary, and then making sure that you do the exercises which are keeping the pelvic floor muscles plumped up and strong, bulking up the muscles, and also releasing tension. So it's not just about holding. And there are quite a few women I talked to who it became very apparent straight away that they're doing all of this all the time, shoulders, neck, everything's holding pelvic floor, desperately not weighing themselves by holding. And there was no releasing of the muscles and just what we call downtroning. None of that kind of opening up, releasing. So we've got to do both. Really, really important to do both of those things. So the gold standard is the topical or intravaginal estrogen cream, and then your strengthening work. It's not just around the pelvic floor, obviously, it's also the stabilizing muscles around the whole pelvis. It's your posture, and it is your breathing patterns, and then the release work as well. So those three sort of pillars, if you like, together. Sitting. So there's quite a few of you for different reasons that we're describing the way you sit for hours, either feeding Bub or at the computer, and I was just like, oh no, please don't do this. So I've got my chair here. Just like when we're going into standing alignment, what we're seeking is to have our head sitting on top of the neck, which is sitting on top of our shoulders. So we're trying to avoid this rounding and poking. This, as soon as we have our head above the shoulders, we realign the diaphragm with the pelvic diaphragm. So diaphragm, breathing diaphragm, and pelvic diaphragm, they work synergistically together. If you're tucking and rounded, you can see there's no synergistic relationship anymore between these 2 points. So one thing you can do is, rather than just kind of sitting on your chair, working like this, or like this, or driving like that, or sitting feeding Bubba, boob to bub type of thing, what we want to do is sit so that our core muscles here and our pelvic floor muscles with our diaphragm muscle can all be activated all the time. So what we want ideally is for every breath we take to be a lovely bit of vascular flow around the whole system. To do that, if you stick your bottom, your behind, to the back of your chair, and then do your rolling one shoulder up and down, other shoulder up and down, and then draw your chin back, give you some bit of a double chin, and then imagine you've got that string from the ridge of your head and it's lifting you up, so you get a lovely long spine now. So I'm not putting my head forward, and I'm not dropping it, I'm just looking straight ahead. And then I've got a gap here between me and the chair. So for most chairs, you need to put something just where your shoulders are. So your shoulder blades can kind of just sit into your prop. And now you can see that this area here is all switched on. And I can be working away at my computer, or if I was feeding Bub, I would have pillow underneath Bubba, pillows underneath my elbows, and Bubba coming to boob rather than boob going down to Bubba. Or if I was sitting on the couch, imagine this is a much bigger chair bit here, what I could do is have another pillow underneath my knees. So I'm like that, on the couch, and then a little blanket just here. I'll get my blanket so you can see what I'm doing. This is a bit awkward. Yeah, so say I'm on the couch so that my bum can be at the back, because otherwise it's very hard to get this symmetrical torso if you're on a deep couch. But you can sit really comfortably. This isn't very comfortable because I'm actually on a chair rather than a couch. But putting a little pillow underneath your knees, so you kind of bring your knees up like that. And then making sure that this area is still pretty aligned. It can be really comfy. You can watch a whole movie without this happening, because over time, this can do a huge amount of damage to our core muscles, our back, our pelvic floor, and our ability to breathe properly. It can really affect the whole way the system works. So there are lots of different chairs on the market that can help. One thing just be aware of, though, are those chairs that put a big curve here that make you actually sit forward. And so you're kind of you're doing a big lumbar curve and sticking your belly out too much, because then I'm also disengaging my core. So that's different from sitting like that. You can see the difference there. Now this is feeling engaged, lumbar curve. It's not, it's disengaged here. And I feel like I'm kind of overarching like that. So that was just a question about how to sit well from a few different people. I did that, if you've been doing the course, I talked about that right at the beginning, actually, in week 1. The squatty potty. I'm a huge fan of putting your feet up when you're eliminating. So the squatting potty is designed for this, but there are lots of different brands on the market. Because I recommend it so much, I asked Squatty Potty for a discount code, and that's in the women's wellbeing space. I can find it and send it to you guys as well. It's like a 15% discount code. And basically, you could even put toilet rolls under your feet. Just lift your feet up so that you go into a squatting position. When we're eliminating, there's a big difference from sitting and having our tubes going kind of that way and having our feet on a bit of height and therefore going into a squatting position and leaning slightly forward. You can see now I'm in a squatting position and now my pipes are going straight down. So a lot easier to eliminate, and you never want to be straining on the loo. So this can be one of those really helpful things so that you're not straining on the loo. Getting a squatty potty to help us go into a squatting position, which is how we're designed to eliminate in a squatting position, just to relax everything and let those pelvic floor muscles to lengthen. That's basically it. I wanted just to tap into those few questions. Oh no, there's one more, sorry. Bit of confusion around actual pelvic floor activation on an exhalation. So, and I can see why this is confusing. It all comes down to the diaphragm and the pelvic floor diaphragm working together. So if you imagine two jellyfish in the ocean and they float up and down like that, when we exhale, when we breathe out, the diaphragm is lifting to push the breath out of us, and we get a synergistic drawing up the pelvic floor muscles. That's when we keep the breath or yeah, a little bit of constriction on the back of the throat, and that releasing of the breath is making us not go into what's called like purple pushing, where we're just holding our breath and squeezing. We don't want to do that. But if we are creating a bit of constriction, we're getting the diaphragm to work harder to lift, and therefore we're getting a bit more of a vacuum effect through the pelvic floor. So when you're doing pelvic floor exercises, Kegels, when you're doing the knack, so you're lifting something heavy, you're going from sit to stand, we want to go or if we're holding those pelvic floor muscles high, if we're working on the slow twitch, so we're holding for about 7 seconds, we want yeah, so you're keeping everything lifted, and then we consciously relax. So exhale for activation. There's also long exhale, and with what's called the apana, the releasing exhale. So it's different. It's like a ha or a hmm, or if you're doing the ujjayi breath. So that's going down, and that allows the pelvic floor muscles to relax, because vagus nerve goes from the brain down through all of the organs, helps those pelvic floor muscles to open up and to relax, helps everything to soften and relax. So if you're wanting to release and relax your pelvic floor muscles, the fastest way to do that is to have your pelvis slightly lifted. So either legs up the wall with your bum on a bolster, or just bum on a bolster, or even child pose where your bum is up and you're resting on top of a bolster holding it. So all of those, heart is lower than bum, and therefore the lungs, because we've got a slight inversion, the lungs, it's easier to push the breath out of us. So it's easier to get that long exhalation. So if you notice, even if you were to do a forward fold and inversion like that, heart is easier for my lungs to release all the breath. So in that case, we are stimulating that vagus nerve, and we're calming everything down and releasing everything. So it can be confusing, because I'm actually asking you to use your exhalation for two different things. One is to lift and to strengthen. And one is to release and lengthen. Ha. And it can just take a bit of practice, basically. So just know that over time, you will find that you automatically, if you're about to sneeze or something, you automatically are able to do that quick lift before you sneeze. Or if you're trying to relax, you'll automatically start to focus on your exhalation, and you'll just find it something that you do. Alrighty, so hopefully I've answered some of your questions there. Have a great day, and do just either pop questions into Women's Wellbeing with Linda Facebook group, or if you are in the womenswellbeing.me festival space, you can either ask in the forum or just send me an email, and I will make sure that I do answer your questions. I've got Arena Van Zyl, the pelvic floor physiotherapist, coming to join me on my next Q&A, and she'll be able to answer more specific questions from those of you who want to know more about prolapse management or scar tissue release from the pelvic floor muscles. Until then, thank you. Take care.